That ship was declared lost with all hands 6 years ago, Admiral Kovic said, narrowing his eyes at the distant speck gradually growing larger on the main view screen. No joke, sir, Lieutenant Reed replied, her fingers dancing across the tactical console. IFF beacon confirms it's the ESS Intrepid. Same registration code, same quantum signature. It's our missing Deep Space Explorer, all right. The bridge of the ESS Vigilant fell silent as the crew tried to process what they were seeing. The Intrepid had been one of humanity's most ambitious projects, a long-range explorer sent to chart the largely unknown Sagittarius arm of the galaxy. Its disappearance had been a crushing blow to the Earth Space Corps, not to mention the families of the 300 crew members who had vanished without a trace. Any life signs? Commander Tanner asked, leaning forward in his chair. Reed frowned at her readouts. Difficult to say at this range. There's unusual interference. Wait, something's not right. The ship's mass is approximately 22% greater than when it departed. That's impossible, Chief Engineer Yoon muttered from her station. Unless they've been collecting rocks in space for 6 years. Or they've made significant modifications, the Admiral interrupted. Lieutenant Reed, open a channel. Channel open, sir. Admiral Kovic squared his shoulders. Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Kovic of the Earth Space Corps, Vessel Vigilant. You are broadcasting as the ESS Intrepid, a ship declared lost in action. Identify yourself immediately. The bridge crew waited, the tension thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. 5 seconds passed. 10. 20. Just as Kovic was about to repeat his hail, the view screen flickered and a woman's face appeared. Her skin was pale, and her once regulation haircut had grown out into a wild mane of auburn hair streaked with premature gray. The uniform she wore bore the insignia of the Earth Space Corps, but it had been modified with unfamiliar patterns and materials. This is Captain Lara Norton of the ESS Intrepid, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Authentication code Sierra Tango 79 Echo Delta. She paused, a strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Sorry we're late for check-in, Admiral. We got a bit sidetracked. 2 hours later, Admiral Kovic found himself walking through the strangest corridors he'd ever seen on an Earth vessel. The Intrepid's interior had been extensively remodeled, with flowing organic shapes replacing the standard utilitarian design of Earth's military-industrial complex. We call it adaptive architecture, Captain Norton explained as she led him through the ship. Behind them trailed Commander Tanner and Chief Engineer Yoon, both gaping like fish out of water. The walls can reconfigure based on need, traffic patterns, or even crew preferences. This technology doesn't exist, Yoon said bluntly. At least not in human hands. Norton's smile widened. A lot can happen in 6 years, Chief. It's been 6 years for us, Kovic pointed out. How long has it been for you? The captain's step faltered for just a moment. 11 years, 4 months, and 17 days, by our count. Kovic exchanged glances with Tanner. Time dilation was expected during near light speed travel, but the Intrepid hadn't been designed to reach relativistic velocities. They entered what should have been the ship's mess hall, but was now an expansive garden. Actual trees, not the algae-based approximations common on space vessels, stretched toward a ceiling that somehow appeared much higher than the ship's exterior dimensions would allow. Crew members in modified uniforms worked among the plants or sat in small groups talking quietly. You've been busy, Kovic said, feeling increasingly disoriented. You have no idea, Norton replied, gesturing for them to sit on benches arranged around a small fountain. Actual water, flowing freely on a spaceship. Such waste would be unthinkable under normal circumstances. But I suppose you want to know what happened to us. That would be a start, Tanner said dryly. Norton nodded to a tall, broad-shouldered man working nearby. He joined them, wiping soil from his hands. This is Dr. Eli Bennett, our chief xenobiologist, Norton said. He can explain better than I can. Bennett settled his large frame onto a bench that seemed too delicate to support him. To put it simply, we found something out there. Or rather, something found us. Aliens, Kovic said flatly. Yes and no, Bennett replied with a shrug that suggested the matter was far more complex than a simple yes or no could convey. We encountered a probe first, an automated system that had been traveling between the stars for what we estimate to be approximately 40,000 years. 40,000, Yoon repeated, her voice faint. At least, Bennett confirmed. It was designed to seek out species with certain characteristics. Intelligence, obviously, but also creativity, adaptability, and a certain stubborn refusal to accept limitations. It was looking for humans specifically? Tanner asked skeptically. Norton laughed, the sound surprisingly warm. No, Commander. It was looking for any species that fit the profile. We just happened to be the ones it found. The probe enveloped our ship, Bennett continued. Before we could take any action, we were elsewhere. Define elsewhere, Kovic demanded. We still don't know exactly, Norton admitted. A pocket dimension, perhaps, or some kind of artificial construct. We found ourselves in orbit around a world that shouldn't exist, a perfect Earth-like planet in a system with no star. Yoon shook her head. Yoon, that's not possible. Hence the artificial construct theory, Bennett said with a patient smile. The planet was inhabited by, well, we called them the architects. Not because they told us that's what they were. They never spoke a word we could understand, but because of what they did. And what was that? Kovic asked, struggling to maintain his professional demeanor despite the increasingly bizarre tale. They built things, Norton said simply. That's all they seemed to do, create, innovate, design and build. Their entire civilization appeared to revolve around the act of creation. Bennett nodded. We quickly realized that they were studying us as much as we were studying them. They were particularly fascinated by our technology, primitive as it must have seemed to them. At first, we thought they might be hostile, Norton continued, but they never made aggressive moves. Instead, they taught us. Taught you what? Tanner asked. Norton gestured around at the impossible garden. Everything. How to manipulate matter at the subatomic level, how to harness quantum fields, how to exceed the limitations we thought were universal constants. Are you saying these architects gave you all this technology? Kovic's voice was heavy with suspicion. No, Bennett replied firmly. That's the most remarkable part. They didn't give us anything except knowledge and opportunity. Every advancement you see here was designed and built by human hands, using human ingenuity. They simply showed us that it was possible. Norton leaned forward, her eyes bright with intensity. That's what they wanted to find, Admiral. A species that could take their fundamental principles and run with them. Create things even they hadn't thought of. And did you? Yoon asked, professional curiosity overriding her disbelief. Norton and Bennett exchanged glances. We did, the captain said softly. That's why we're back. Chief Engineer Yoon had always prided herself on being unflappable. 25 years in the Earth Space Corps had exposed her to everything from catastrophic engine failures to first contact situations with 3 previously unknown alien species. But what she was seeing in the Intrepid's engine room defied all her experience and training. You're telling me this thing is your propulsion system? She asked, circling the pulsating crystalline structure that occupied the center of the vast chamber. It resembled nothing so much as a giant, semi-transparent heart, rhythmically contracting and expanding, sending what looked like luminous blood through veins that extended into the ship's walls. We call it the pulse drive, the Intrepid's chief engineer explained. Lieutenant Commander Farzad hadn't aged well during the ship's absence. His face was lined and weathered beyond his 40-odd years, and a jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. It's a quantum displacement engine that creates controlled tears in spacetime. That's theoretical technology, Yoon protested. The math doesn't even work on paper. Farzad's laugh was dry and a little bitter. The math works fine. Our equations were just missing a few variables. Yoon approached the crystalline heart cautiously. What's it made of? Exotic matter stabilized in a quantum matrix, Farzad replied, as casually as if he were discussing titanium alloys. The crystal itself is grown, not manufactured. Grown? Yoon couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. From a seed crystal, yes. It took about 3 years to reach maturity. Farzad patted the pulsating structure with familiar affection. The principles aren't that different from growing semiconductor crystals, just with a few extra spatial dimensions involved. Yoon struggled to maintain her professional composure. And this enables faster-than-light travel? FTL is such a limiting term, Farzad said with a dismissive wave. The pulse doesn't move through space faster than light. It temporarily relocates space itself. The ship never actually moves in the conventional sense. That's impossible, Yoon stammered. And yet, here we are. Farzad's smile was sympathetic. I had the same reaction when the architects first demonstrated the concept. Took me 2 years just to understand the basic principles. Yoon ran her fingers through her short hair, a nervous habit she'd never quite broken. Look, I'm willing to accept that you've made some breakthrough advances, but this is beyond anything we've even theorized. That's precisely the point, Farzad said, suddenly serious. The architects didn't choose us because we were the most advanced species. They chose us because, for all our limitations, humans refuse to accept that something can't be done. He gestured at the pulsating heart. When I first saw what they could do, I thought they must be gods. But they're not. They're just very, very old, and they've been refining their knowledge for millions of years. So why did they let you go? Yoon asked. If they've been searching for species like us for so long, who says they let us go? Farzad interrupted. We left. You left? How? The scarred engineer's eyes gleamed with unmistakable pride. We figured out how their containment system worked and we escaped. But why? If they were peaceful, if they were teaching you? Because we're human, Farzad said simply. And humans don't like being kept in cages, no matter how comfortable they are. Commander Tanner had always considered himself a reasonably fit man. But keeping up with Dr. Valentina Kuznetsova was proving challenging. The Intrepid's chief medical officer moved through the ship's corridors with the graceful efficiency of someone who had complete confidence in her surroundings. Your medical facilities are impressive, Tanner managed between breaths as they headed toward what would have been the standard sickbay on an Earth vessel. They're adequate, Dr. Kuznetsova replied with a slight Russian accent. Unlike most of the Intrepid's crew, she showed few signs of her extended journey. Her dark hair was neatly cropped, her uniform pristine, her movements precise. Only the lines around her eyes hinted at experiences beyond her years. The Earth Space Corps would consider this level of medical technology to be more than adequate, Tanner said diplomatically. Some might call it miraculous. Kuznetsova's laugh was sharp and brief. Miracles are just science we don't understand yet, Commander. Though I admit, there were times when even I was tempted to believe in the supernatural. They entered the medical bay, and Tanner stopped short. Instead of the clinical white and steel fixtures he expected, the room was filled with gently curved surfaces and warm colors. Beds that appeared to be made of some kind of living tissue lined the walls, and instead of the usual array of monitors and equipment, there were only a few subtle interfaces visible. Don't let the aesthetics fool you, Kuznetsova said, noting his surprise. This is the most advanced medical facility in human history. She approached one of the strange beds and placed her hand on it. The surface rippled in response. Programmable matter. It can form any surgical tool I need, deliver medications directly through the skin, or adjust its shape to perfectly support a patient's body. Programmable matter, Tanner repeated slowly, like the adaptive architecture Captain Norton mentioned. Similar principles, different application, Kuznetsova confirmed. The real breakthrough isn't the technology itself, but our understanding of biology. She gestured to a wall that suddenly became transparent, revealing a laboratory beyond. We can now regrow organs, regenerate nervous tissue, even rewrite genetic code to eliminate inherited diseases. Tanner stepped closer to the transparent wall, studying the lab beyond. Researchers moved among equipment that bore only passing resemblance to anything he'd seen before. Is that why your crew seems so healthy, despite being lost in space for over a decade? Partially, Kuznetsova admitted. We've developed treatments that slow cellular degradation, what you might call anti-aging therapies. But more importantly, we've virtually eliminated disease among the crew. All disease? Cancer, viral infections, bacterial infections, prion diseases, all preventable or curable now, she said with professional pride. The average lifespan of our crew members, barring accidents, is projected to be around 150 Earth years. Tanner's mind reeled at the implications. Dr. Kuznetsova, you understand that if what you're saying is true, this technology would completely transform human society. Of course, she replied calmly. That's why we came back. But the economic disruption alone, Tanner began, would be significant, Kuznetsova finished for him. But consider the alternative, Commander. Should we have kept this knowledge to ourselves, lived out our extended lives in isolated luxury while the rest of humanity continued to suffer from diseases we could cure? Put that way, it did sound rather selfish. Still, Tanner couldn't help but think of the chaos such revelations might cause. The Earth governments will want to control this technology. Kuznetsova's smile was cold. They can try. But we've learned a few things about human nature during our isolation, Commander. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's why we've already begun transmitting our medical database to every major research institution on Earth. Tanner felt the blood drain from his face. You've what? The information belongs to all of humanity, not just those who can afford it or those who happen to hold power, Kuznetsova said firmly. The transmission began the moment we entered communications range. Captain Norton authorized this? Tanner asked, struggling to keep his voice level. It was a unanimous crew decision, Kuznetsova. And before you ask, yes, we're prepared for the consequences. Admiral Kovic had seen a lot in his 40 years of service to the Earth Space Corps, but he'd never seen anything quite like the command center of the ESS Intrepid. Gone were the rigid lines and utilitarian design of a standard Earth vessel, replaced by an organic flow that reminded him more of a living organism than a machine. It's unusual, I know, Captain Norton said, noting his expression as she led him around the circular space. Unlike the traditional bridge with its clear hierarchy of stations, the Intrepid's command center featured clusters of what appeared to be living consoles, arranged not in rows but in a pattern that somehow reminded Kovic of neurons in a brain. Unusual doesn't begin to cover it, Kovic replied dryly. Where's the captain's chair? Norton gestured to a slightly raised platform in the center of the room. I don't sit much these days. Found it makes me sleepy. Kovic grunted. Hard to maintain command presence from a recliner, I suppose. Something like that, Norton agreed with a faint smile. She moved to what Kovic assumed was the main operations console, where a young lieutenant was manipulating symbols in a three-dimensional holographic display. Lieutenant Okafor, status report. All systems nominal, Captain, the lieutenant replied without looking up from her work. The Vigilant is maintaining position off our starboard bow, and Earth Space Command continues to demand we power down and prepare for boarding. Still? Norton shook her head, apparently more amused than concerned. You'd think they'd get tired of asking. Standard protocol for potentially hostile vessels, Kovic pointed out. Hostile? Norton's eyebrows rose. We're an Earth ship with an Earth crew, Admiral. A ship that disappeared 6 years ago and returned with impossible technology, Kovic countered. Surely you understand the security concerns. Norton sighed and gestured for him to follow her to a more private area of the command center. Once they were relatively alone, she fixed him with a penetrating stare. Let's be honest with each other, shall we? Your superiors aren't concerned about security. They're concerned about control. They want our technology, our advancements, and they want to decide who gets access to them. Kovic didn't bother denying it. Can you blame them? What you've brought back could destabilize the entire solar system. Or it could usher in a new golden age, Norton countered. Imagine it, Admiral. Unlimited clean energy, an end to scarcity, cures for diseases that have plagued humanity for millennia. Power like that needs to be managed responsibly, Kovic insisted. By whom? Norton asked sharply. The same governments that have spent the last century fighting over dwindling resources? The corporations that profit from artificial scarcity? The military that sees every advancement as a potential weapon? Kovic bristled. That's an oversimplification and you know it. Perhaps, Norton conceded. But tell me honestly, if you take control of this ship and its technology, will it benefit all of humanity? Or just those deemed worthy by the powers that be? The Admiral was saved from responding by an alert that sounded throughout the command center. Lieutenant Okafor looked up from her console. Captain, we're detecting multiple ships approaching at high velocity, Earth Defense Fleet signatures. Norton didn't seem surprised. How many? 7 cruisers and a dreadnought, Okafor reported calmly. They're on an intercept course, weapons hot. Kovic felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. They didn't authorize this, didn't they? Norton's expression was skeptical. Or did they simply not inform you? Before Kovic could respond, another officer called out. Captain, receiving transmission from the lead vessel, the ESS Resolute. On screen, Norton ordered. The holographic display shifted to show the stern face of Admiral Wei, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet's 1st Division. Wei's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Kovic. Admiral Kovic, Wei said coldly, I see you've already boarded the rogue vessel. Rogue vessel? Norton repeated, her voice dangerously soft. That's an interesting way to describe an Earth ship returning home. Wei ignored her, focusing on Kovic. Admiral, you are ordered to return to the Vigilant immediately. The Intrepid is to be escorted to Earth Defense Station Alpha for full inspection and quarantine. Under whose authority? Kovic demanded. Direct order from the Joint Chiefs, Wei replied. This vessel represents an unknown threat. Threat? Norton interrupted. We've made no aggressive moves. We've complied with all standard protocols. Your existence is the threat, Captain, Wei said bluntly. You disappeared for 6 years and returned with technology that our best scientists say is impossible. Until we understand exactly what happened to you and what you've brought back, you will be considered a potential danger to Earth's security. Norton's posture shifted subtly, and Kovic was reminded that before her promotion to captain, Lyra Norton had been one of the Corps' most decorated tactical officers. "Admiral Way," she said, her voice perfectly controlled. "I understand your concerns, but I assure you, my crew and I are not a threat to Earth or any human settlement. We're prepared to share everything we've learned, but we will do so freely and equally, not under duress or quarantine." Way's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice in the matter, Captain. You will comply, or we will be forced to take action." Norton smiled, a small, tight expression that didn't reach her eyes. "I strongly advise against that course of action, Admiral." "Is that a threat?" Way demanded. "A friendly warning," Norton corrected. "The Intrepid is not the same ship that left Earth 6 years ago. We don't want conflict, but we are prepared to defend ourselves if necessary." Way's laugh was dismissive. "You're outnumbered 8-1, Captain, and regardless of what modifications you've made, you're facing the most advanced combat vessels in the Earth fleet." "Most advanced by whose standards?" Norton asked quietly. Kovich had seen enough. "Admiral Way, Captain Norton has shown no hostile intent. I recommend we de-escalate this situation and—" "Your recommendation is noted, Admiral Kovic." Way cut him off. "But my orders are clear. Captain Norton, you have 30 minutes to power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. Way out." The transmission ended abruptly. Norton turned to Kovic, her expression unreadable. "Well, that went about as expected." "You need to comply," Kovic said urgently. "Whatever upgrades you've made, you can't take on 8 military vessels." "Can't I?" Norton seemed genuinely curious. "What do you think would happen if we did?" "People would die," Kovic said bluntly. "Maybe a lot of people." "Agreed," Norton nodded. "Which is why we won't be fighting." Relief washed over Kovic. "Thank you, Captain. I'll inform Admiral Way that—" "We won't be surrendering either," Norton interrupted. She turned to her communications officer. "Lieutenant, open a channel to all Earth vessels." "Channel open, Captain." Norton straightened her uniform and addressed the invisible audience. "This is Captain Lyra Norton of the ESS Intrepid. To all Earth vessels, we have returned with knowledge and technology that rightfully belongs to all of humanity. We have no wish for conflict, but we will not allow this knowledge to be controlled or suppressed. Therefore, we have already transmitted the fundamentals of our advances to multiple independent sources throughout the solar system." She paused, letting that sink in. "Furthermore, we will not be submitting to quarantine or seizure. We came back to share what we've learned, not to have it locked away by those who fear change." Kovic stared at her in disbelief. "What are you doing?" Norton ignored him. "To demonstrate our peaceful intentions and our resolve, we will now depart this area. If anyone attempts to prevent us, we will be forced to defend ourselves. We hope instead that you'll focus on the information we've shared. Use it wisely. Norton out." The channel closed, and Norton turned to her helm officer. "Prepare the pulse drive." "Captain," Kovic said urgently, "this is insanity. You're throwing away any chance of a peaceful resolution." "On the contrary," Norton replied calmly, "I'm preventing a conflict by removing ourselves from the equation." "You can't outrun the defense fleet," Kovic insisted. "And if you try to fight?" "Who said anything about running or fighting?" Norton asked with a small smile. "Admiral, I suggest you return to the Vigilant now. What we're about to do has never been attempted this close to a planetary body, and I'd hate for your ship to be caught in the displacement field." Kovic felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you planning?" Instead of answering, Norton nodded to a security officer who approached with a small device. "This will transport you directly back to your ship," she explained, handing it to Kovic. "Just press the central button." Kovic stared at the device. "Transporters don't exist." "They do now," Norton said simply. "Goodbye, Admiral. I hope we meet again under better circumstances." Before Kovic could respond, Norton nodded to the security officer who pressed the device in Kovic's hand. There was a brief sensation of weightlessness, a flash of light, and suddenly, Kovic was standing on the bridge of the Vigilant, surrounded by his startled crew. "Admiral!" Commander Tanner exclaimed, jumping to his feet. "How did you—" "No time!" Kovic snapped, rushing to the view screen. "Status of the Intrepid?" "Still holding position, sir," the tactical officer reported. "But they're generating some kind of energy field we can't identify." On the screen, the Intrepid was surrounded by a shimmering halo of light that pulsed rhythmically. "All ships, target that vessel!" Admiral Way's voice commanded over the fleet channel. "Disable their propulsion systems!" Kovic watched in horror as the Defense Fleet vessels opened fire. Beams of concentrated energy lanced toward the Intrepid, only to bend around the shimmering field, missing the ship entirely. "What the hell?" someone muttered. The pulsing light around the Intrepid intensified, growing brighter and faster. "Sir, we're detecting a massive buildup of some kind of quantum energy," the science officer reported, her voice tense. "It's like nothing I've ever seen." "All ships, full power to weapons," Wei ordered. "Take that ship down now!" Another barrage of weapons fire erupted from the fleet vessels, this time including kinetic projectiles that should have been impossible to deflect. Yet none reached their target. The pulsing light around the Intrepid suddenly contracted, collapsing inward like a star going supernova in reverse. For a moment, the ship seemed to distort, stretching impossibly before snapping back to normal dimensions. Then, with a flash so bright it momentarily overloaded the Vigilance visual sensors, the Intrepid simply vanished. When the view screen cleared, there was nothing but empty space where the returned explorer had been. "Where did they go?" Tanner asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The science officer shook her head in disbelief. "No warp signature, no ion trail. It's like they ceased to exist. Or moved in a way we can't track," Kovic said quietly. Admiral Wei's voice crackled over the comm. "All vessels scan for debris. They must have self-destructed." But Kovic knew better. Whatever the Intrepid had become during its long absence, self-destruction was the last thing Captain Norton would choose. "Sir," the communications officer called, "we're receiving thousands of incoming transmissions from Earth and the colonies. Scientific institutions, medical facilities, universities. They're all reporting receipt of massive data packages from the Intrepid." Kovic closed his eyes briefly. "So that's their play, sir?" Tanner looked confused. "They didn't need to fight us or convince us," Kovic explained. "They just needed to stall long enough to ensure their knowledge couldn't be contained." "But where did they go?" Tanner persisted. Kovic stared at the empty space on the view screen. "Somewhere we can't follow. At least, not yet." 3 months later, Admiral Kovic stood at the window of his office in Earth Space Command headquarters, watching the bustling activity in the shipyard below. The massive form of the ESS Explorer dominated the view, humanity's first ship equipped with a prototype pulse drive, based on the partial schematics transmitted by the Intrepid. A chime announced a visitor, and Kovic turned as Commander Tanner entered, carrying a datapad. "Progress report on Project Intrepid, sir," Tanner said, handing over the pad. Kovic skimmed the document, nodding occasionally. "The medical applications are proceeding faster than expected." "Yes, sir. Dr. Kuznetsova's data on cellular regeneration was comprehensive enough that our researchers were able to develop working treatments almost immediately. The first human trials are showing remarkable results." "And the adaptive architecture?" Tanner grimaced slightly. "Slower progress there. We understand the principles, but growing the base materials is proving challenging." "We'll get there," Kovic said with uncharacteristic optimism. "What about the Defense Council? Any change in their position?" "Still divided," Tanner reported. "Some members are pushing for aggressive development of military applications. Others want to focus on the humanitarian benefits. The debate is heated." Kovic snorted. As expected. He turned back to the window, gazing at the experimental ship below. "You know, I've been thinking about something Captain Norton said. About why the architects chose humans." "Our creativity and stubbornness?" Tanner recalled. "Partly that," Kovic agreed. "But I think there was more to it. The architects had all this knowledge, all this technology, but they were stuck in their ways. They needed a species that would take what they'd learned and do something unexpected with it. And that's us? Humans?" Kovic smiled slightly. "Look at what we've accomplished in just 3 months with incomplete information. Imagine what we'll do in a year, 5 years, a century." Tanner was quiet for a moment, considering. "Do you think we'll find them again? The Intrepid crew?" "I'm counting on it," Kovic said firmly. "But next time it won't be as pursuers. It will be as equals." "That's an optimistic view, sir," Tanner observed. "Especially for you." Kovic laughed, a genuine sound that surprised them both. "What can I say, Commander? The universe just got a whole lot bigger, and for once humanity isn't playing catch-up. We're charging ahead." He gestured to the prototype ship below. "The Explorer is just the beginning. We've been given a glimpse of what's possible, and in typical human fashion we're already demanding more." "Humanity, fuck yeah," Tanner suggested with a wry smile. "Indeed, Commander," Kovic agreed, his expression turning thoughtful. "You know, throughout history, we humans have had a nasty habit of turning our greatest advancements into weapons. Maybe this time will be different." "What makes you think so?" Kovic's gaze returned to the stars visible beyond the shipyard. "Because for the first time, we know for certain that we're not alone out there. And more importantly, we know that we have something unique to offer. Something even a civilization thousands or millions of years more advanced than our own considers valuable. Our stubbornness? Tanner suggested. Our humanity, Kovic corrected, with all its flaws and virtues. He turned from the window with newfound purpose. Now let's get back to work. Those stars aren't going to explore themselves. As they left the office, a small notification appeared on Kovic's datapad. A message with no identifiable source. It contained only 5 words. See you out there, Admiral. Kovic smiled. Captain Norton had always been fond of having the last word. Somewhere, far beyond the reach of Earth's most powerful sensors, the ESS Intrepid emerged from its quantum displacement. The ship hung in space above an uncharted world circling a yellow star not unlike Sol. On the command deck, Captain Norton watched the blue-green planet rotate slowly below them. Life signs confirmed, Captain, Lieutenant Okafor reported. Pre-industrial civilization, approximately equivalent to Earth's late Bronze Age. Any sign they've detected our arrival? Norton asked. None, Captain. We're well outside their observational capabilities. Dr. Bennett joined Norton at the viewport. Another candidate species? Possibly, Norton agreed. We'll observe for now, maintain our distance, no interference. Just like the architects did with us initially, Bennett noted. With one key difference, Norton corrected. If they prove ready, we won't keep them in a cage. We'll invite them to join us as equals. Bennett smiled. Think they'll be as stubborn as humans? I hope so, Norton replied, watching the distant lights of civilization twinkling on the night side of the planet. The universe needs more stubbornness, more creativity, more refusal to accept limitations. More humanity, Bennett suggested. Norton nodded, a smile playing at her lips. Exactly. Helmsman, establish standard orbit. Let's see what our new neighbors are made of. Far below, unaware of the watchers above, a young alien gazed up at the night sky, wondering what lay beyond the stars, and dreaming of one day finding out. Little did they know that humans had already paved the way. End. First Lieutenant Dmitry Kozlov pressed his face against the observation port, squinting at the approaching vessel. That's supposed to be a warship? It looks like someone welded a bunch of cargo containers together and slapped some engines on the back. According to our scans, it's definitely military. Commander Zik still nervously, the sound echoing through the pristine command deck of the Varaxi flagship Eternal Dominion. Though I admit the design is unconventional. Unconventional? Kozlov snorted. It's like they designed it drunk. Look at those asymmetrical hull plates! And what's with all the external piping? That's just asking for a critical hit. Unlike the sleek, crystalline perfection of the Varaxi vessel, the approaching human ship was indeed a monstrosity of practical engineering. All exposed conduits, mismatched armor plating, and seemingly random protrusions. The name USS Bangalore was stenciled on its hull in faded lettering, with what appeared to be maintenance graffiti scrawled beneath it. Commander Zixtil's compound eyes reflected the holographic display showing the vessel's approach. The humans call it the Bangalore. Our intelligence suggests it's one of their mid-tier vessels. Mid-tier? Kozlov laughed. I'd hate to see their low tier. You misunderstand, Lieutenant. The commander's voice dropped an octave, a sign of Varaxi concern. The humans don't build ships to be aesthetically pleasing. They build them to be functional. Well, this ought to be the easiest first contact in Varaxi history, Kozlov said, straightening his immaculate uniform. Send the standard greeting package and prepare the diplomatic reception bay. Let's get this over with. The commander hesitated. Intelligence suggests we should exercise caution. With that heap of junk? What are they going to do? Throw wrenches at us? Little did Lieutenant Kozlov know just how wrong he was about to be. Captain Morgan Reed of the USS Bangalore scratched at her 3-day stubble as she studied the alien vessel through the bridge's cracked main view screen. The replacement part had been back-ordered for months, but nobody really cared enough to expedite it. After all, a cracked screen didn't affect functionality, and the Bangalore had more pressing maintenance issues. "Would you look at that beauty?" she whistled. "It's like someone carved a giant diamond and then stuffed a fusion reactor inside it." Lieutenant Banks, her XO, nodded while sipping from a coffee mug with "Not Today, Alien Scum" printed on it. "Pretty, sure. But I'll bet my last bottle of contraband whiskey there's not a single redundant system on that thing. One good hit and it'll shatter like my ex's wine glass when I told her I was shipping out." "Speaking of contraband," Reed said, Is Chief Wallace still running that still in engineering? Of course not, Captain, Banks replied with a perfectly straight face. That would be against regulations. Good, good. Make sure he doesn't save me any then. Also against regulations. The communications officer, Lieutenant Martinez, swiveled in her chair. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the alien vessel. Standard first contact package, mathematical sequences, simple pictographs, the usual we come in peace stuff. Well, that's nice of them. Let's see. Protocol says we should respond with our own package, right? Banks nodded. That's what the diplomatic corps would want. All right then. Reed stretched. Her uniform rumpled from the 36-hour shift she'd just pulled. Send them our response package. The cleaned-up one, not the real one. Aye, Captain. Martinez's fingers flew over her console, which had several keys replaced with mismatched replacements. Package sent. Reed stood up. Now let's get ready for visitors. Banks, make sure everyone's wearing the proper uniforms. Everyone only has one uniform, Captain. Then make sure they're wearing it. She paused. And tell Wallace to hide the still. We're about to make history here. First contact with the... What are they called again? Varaxi, Captain. Right. First contact with the Varaxi. Let's try not to start an interstellar incident on day one. Back on the Eternal Dominion, Lieutenant Kozlov was accompanying Commander Zixtil to the docking bay when an alarming report came in. Commander! A junior officer scurried up to them, antennae twitching in distress. Our sensors have detected multiple unusual energy signatures from the human vessel. What kind of energy signatures? Zixtil demanded. That's just it. We don't know. Some appear to be crude fission reactors, others some form of plasma containment, and there are at least 3 different propulsion systems active simultaneously. Kozlov frowned. That can't be right. No ship uses multiple propulsion types at once. It's inefficient. Inefficiency seems to be their specialty, the commander muttered. What else? There appear to be leaks, venting, intentional releases of various gases and fluids. And we're detecting numerous small life forms aboard, not just humans. Other sentient species? Kozlov asked. No, much smaller. Possibly microorganisms? And there are temperature variations throughout the ship that make no logical sense. Some sections are near freezing, while others are almost hot enough to damage equipment. Commander Zixtil's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Varaxi equivalent of a human chewing their nails. This defies all known shipbuilding principles. A vessel shouldn't function with such contradictions. Yet it's headed straight for us, Kozlov pointed out. Indeed. The commander squared her shoulders. Prepare the diplomatic reception bay, but double the security detail. Quietly. Captain, they're scanning us again. Lieutenant Clark, the Bangalore sensor officer, didn't even look up from his game of solitaire as he reported this. Pretty thorough this time. Reed nodded. Let him look. Nothing classified on this rust bucket anyway. Except the still, Banks muttered. I didn't hear that. Reed stood up and stretched. All right, people. Let's make ourselves presentable. We're about to meet the neighbors. Martinez, get me shipwide. A moment later, the shipwide comm crackled to life. Attention all hands. This is the captain speaking. In about 30 minutes, we'll be docking with an alien vessel for humanity's first face-to-face, or whatever they have, meeting with the Varaxi. So please, for the love of whatever you hold sacred, shower if you haven't in the last week, put on clean uniforms if you can find them, and at least pretend we're a disciplined military vessel for a few hours. Read out. She turned to Banks. Think they'll buy it? Banks snorted. That we're a professional military outfit? Not a chance. Well, let's hope they have a sense of humor then. The Bangalore docked with surprising precision given its ramshackle appearance. The docking collar extended from the Varaxi ship, connecting with the human vessel's airlock with a series of mechanical clanks that made Commander Zixtil wince. A delegation of Varaxi officials assembled in the reception bay, all wearing their ceremonial armor that gleamed with iridescent perfection. Lieutenant Kozlov stood at attention beside the commander, mentally rehearsing the first contact protocol. The airlock cycled, hissed, thudded, banged alarmingly, hissed again, and finally opened. Captain Reed stepped through, followed by a small delegation of human officers. Despite their best efforts, they looked like they had dressed for the occasion in what might generously be called cleanish uniforms. Reed's captain's insignia was slightly tarnished, and Banks had a coffee stain on his collar that he'd tried to hide with a strategically positioned stylus. Greetings on behalf of humanity and the United Earth Coalition, Reed said, following protocol to the letter, if not the spirit. I am Captain Morgan Reed of the UEC vessel Bangalore. Commander Zixtil stepped forward, performing the elaborate greeting gesture of her species. I am Commander Zixtil of the Varaxi Eternal Fleet. We welcome you to the Eternal Dominion. Kozlov couldn't help but stare at the humans. They were so disheveled compared to the Varaxi. Even at their most formal, they looked like they'd just rolled out of their sleeping chambers. Reed smiled, a gesture the Varaxi had studied but still found slightly disconcerting. We appreciate your welcome, Commander. We look forward to establishing peaceful relations between our species. As do we, the commander replied. If you and your officers would follow me, we have prepared a reception area more suitable for discussions. As they walked through the pristine corridors of the Varaxi flagship, the contrast between the two groups couldn't have been more stark. The Varaxi moved with perfect coordination, their steps silent, their posture impeccable. The humans, meanwhile, gawked at everything, whispered to each other, and one even tried to take a selfie until Banks elbowed him sharply in the ribs. Your ship is beautiful, Reed said, apparently sincere despite her casual demeanor. I've never seen anything like it. Thank you, Commander Zixtil replied. It is the pride of our fleet. I bet. Our ships are built more for function than form, as you've probably noticed. Yes, we did observe some unusual design choices in your vessel, Reed laughed. That's diplomatic speak for your ship looks like crap, right? Don't worry, we're not offended. The Bangalore isn't pretty, but she gets the job done. Kozlov couldn't contain himself any longer. But how? Our sensors detected multiple propulsion systems, inconsistent environmental controls, and several apparent structural integrity issues. Oh yeah, about that, Reed said casually. The main drive gave out about 6 months ago, so we're running on the backup system plus some creative modifications our engineers made. As for the environmental controls, well, there's a dispute between the different decks. Engineering likes it hot, science likes it cold, and nobody can agree on a compromise, so everyone just controls their own section. Commander Zixtil's antennae twitched in confusion. And your superiors allow this? Allow. Half the modifications were their idea. Fleet Command's motto might as well be, if it works, don't fix it, and if it doesn't work, hit it until it does. The Varaxi delegation exchanged concerned glances. But surely this affects efficiency, Kozlov pressed. Oh, absolutely, Reed agreed cheerfully. But we make up for it with creativity and duct tape. Lots and lots of duct tape. The reception area was a marvel of Varaxi architecture. Sweeping crystalline arches, gravity-defying floating platforms, and ambient lighting that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere at once. As the human delegation settled onto the offered seating, which adjusted uncomfortably to their alien physiology, Reed couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between this space and the mess hall on the Bangalore, where tables were permanently stained with generations of coffee rings and the chairs were held together with wire and prayer. So, Commander Zixtil began, we are most curious about human civilization. Our limited observations suggest you are relatively new to interstellar travel. Yep, only been out here about 70 years, Reed confirmed. We're the new kids on the block, still figuring things out as we go. 70 years? Lieutenant Kozlov couldn't hide his surprise. But your technology is a mishmash of whatever works. Banks finished for him. We're pretty good at adapting alien tech we find, reverse engineering the basics, and then slapping our own spin on it. You find alien technology? Commander Zixtil's voice had that concerned drop again. Abandoned outposts, derelict ships, that sort of thing, Reed explained. The galaxy's full of leftovers from species that either moved on or died out. We call it salvage archaeology. Most civilizations consider such artifacts sacred historical treasures, Kozlov pointed out stiffly. Reed shrugged. We consider them finders keepers. Look, if someone's gone for 10,000 years, they're probably not coming back for their stuff, right? Before the conversation could devolve further, a junior human officer rushed in, forgetting all protocol. Captain, we've got a situation on the Bangalore. Reed's casual demeanor vanished instantly. What kind of situation, Nguyen? It's Chief Wallace's still, ma'am. There was a pressure buildup and, well, spit it out. There's ethanol vapor venting into the Varaxi docking bay, and it's highly flammable. Commander Zixtil shot to her feet. You brought explosive chemicals aboard our vessel? Not intentionally, Reed assured her, also standing. It's just a little moonshine operation. Completely against regulations, of course. The chief will be disciplined severely. Moonshine? Kozlov asked. Homemade alcohol, Banks explained. The food synthesizers make terrible whiskey. The Varaxi security detail's hands moved to their weapons. Whoa, Reed held up her hands. No need for that. It's just a little leak. Happens all the time on the Bangalore. All the time. Commander Zixtil's voice was now almost subsonic with alarm. Figure of speech, Reed backpedaled. Look, if you'll just let my engineers access the area, they can contain the leak before... A distant whump sound interrupted her, followed by alarms blaring throughout the Varaxi ship. That happens, Reed finished lamely. The next few hours were a chaotic blur of emergency responses, diplomatic apologizing, and what could only be described as cross-species engineering improvisation. The explosion had been small, by Bangalore standards, but to the Varaxi, whose ships were engineered with tolerances that allowed for virtually zero unexpected events, it was catastrophic. Several critical systems near the docking bay had failed, including part of the ship's central environmental regulation matrix, which is how Captain Reed and Chief Engineer Wallace found themselves elbow-deep in Varaxi technology, working alongside increasingly impressed alien engineers to restore functionality. See, your problem is there's no redundancy, Wallace explained, his massive beard speckled with crystalline Varaxi tech dust. When one system fails, everything connected to it goes down too. The Varaxi chief engineer, a being named Tilzar, watched in horror as Wallace bypassed several safety protocols with what appeared to be a modified human eating utensil. That is not recommended procedure. Recommended procedures are for ships that work the way they're supposed to, Wallace grunted, twisting something that definitely wasn't meant to be twisted. The Bangalore taught us to improvise. Remarkably, the humans' unorthodox approach was working. Systems that the Varaxi had estimated would take days to repair were coming back online within hours. Meanwhile, in the command deck, Reed had joined Commander Zixtil to explain exactly how a still had found its way onto a military vessel. It's technically a water purification system, Reed said with a straight face. The alcohol is just a byproduct. A byproduct you consume for recreational purposes, the commander observed. Waste not, want not. Besides, it doubles as emergency fuel in a pinch. Lieutenant Kozlov, who had been silent until now, finally asked the question that had been bothering him since the humans arrived. Is everything on your ship dual purpose? Reed considered this. Triple purpose in some cases. The food synthesizer in the mess hall also serves as a basic 3D printer and, when needed, a backup atmospheric scrubber. Oh, and most of our hand weapons can be reconfigured into welding tools. The Varaxi officers stared at her in disbelief. What? Reed asked. Doesn't everybody do that? No, Commander Zixtil said firmly. No other species we have encountered designs their technology this way. Most civilizations specialize their tools for maximum efficiency at single tasks. Huh. Reed scratched her chin. Seems limiting. Before the commander could respond, the ship's communications system chimed. Commander, this is engineering. The environmental systems are back online. The human engineer has implemented some modifications. Modifications? Zixtil's voice was wary. Yes, he says they will prevent total system failure if a similar incident occurs in the future. It's not according to specifications, but initial tests show a 27% increase in system resilience. Reed tried not to look smug. She failed. 12 hours later, the crisis had been fully resolved. Not only had the human engineers repaired the damage, but they'd also improved several Varaxi systems in ways that the aliens found simultaneously horrifying and fascinating. The diplomatic reception, once almost derailed by disaster, had resumed, though with a markedly different tone. The Varaxi were now viewing the humans with a mixture of trepidation and reluctant respect. I still don't understand, Lieutenant Kozlov said, nursing a drink that the humans had assured him was safe for Varaxi consumption. Your ship looks like it's held together with adhesives and hope. Your protocols are flexible to the point of non-existence, and yet you're not only surviving in space but thriving. Reed, considerably more relaxed now that the immediate crisis had passed, leaned back in her seat. That's humanity for you. We're not the strongest, fastest, or smartest species out there, but we're really, really good at adapting. And drinking, Banks added, raising his glass. And drinking, Reed agreed. Commander Zixtil, who had spent the past several hours reviewing the modifications the humans had made to her ship, finally spoke. Your approach to technology is unorthodox. Thanks. That wasn't necessarily a compliment, the commander clarified. But it is. Effective in its own way. Our engineers are already discussing implementing some of your redundancy concepts in future vessel designs. See? Reed grinned. Cultural exchange at its finest. You teach us about your pretty crystal tech. We teach you about duct tape and WD-40. I still have questions about this duct tape material, one of the Varaxi engineers interjected. Its adhesive properties defy our material science understanding. Trust me, you don't want to go down that rabbit hole, Wallace advised, having finally joined the gathering after washing the worst of the grime off his hands. Humanity's relationship with duct tape is almost religious. As the evening progressed, an unlikely camaraderie began to develop between the two crews. The Varaxi, initially appalled by human informality, were gradually warming to the species' irreverent approach to, well, everything. The humans, for their part, were fascinated by Varaxi precision and technology, even as they suggested increasingly outlandish improvements. Later that night, as the reception wound down, Commander Zixtil found herself in a quiet corner with Captain Reed, both watching their crews interact. I must admit, the commander said, when we first detected your vessel, we were concerned. Because it looks like space junk? Reed guessed. Partially, but more because our sensors detected weapons capabilities that seemed inconsistent with your apparent technological level. Reed's expression grew more serious. Ah, you noticed those. Indeed. Your ship appears primitive in many ways, yet houses energy weapons that our analysts are still trying to categorize. Yeah, about that. Reed took a sip of her drink. Remember I mentioned salvage archaeology? Well, let's just say we found some pretty interesting stuff out there. Things that go boom in very impressive ways. And you incorporated this technology without fully understanding it? Reed shrugged. We understood enough to make it work. The details can come later. That approach would terrify most spacefaring species. The commander's antennae twitched, including mine. Is that why you had us scanned 6 ways to Sunday before letting us dock? Partially. We were also trying to determine if your ship was an actual threat or just a very unusual transport vessel. Reed laughed. The Bangalore is both, honestly. She's not our newest or prettiest ship, but she's got teeth when she needs them. The commander was silent for a moment, considering. Our preliminary reports on humanity suggested you might be a benign trading species. I see now that assessment was incomplete. Oh, we love trading, Reed assured her. But we've also learned that space can be a dangerous place. The Bangalore might look like she's one hull breach away from becoming a debris field, but she's survived 3 major engagements with pirates and an encounter with something we still can't explain that ate energy like candy. Ate energy? Long story. Weird anomaly. The science team is still arguing about whether it was alive or not. Commander Zixtil's compound eyes seemed to focus more intently on Reed. And how did your ship survive this encounter? We shut everything down, played dead. Then when it got close enough, we overloaded our backup reactor and vented the plasma directly at it. Reed grinned. Turns out even energy-eating anomalies can get indigestion. You deliberately created a reactor overload? Controlled overload, Reed clarified. Mostly controlled, anyway. The commander's mandibles clicked rapidly. Captain Reed, I must say that in my many cycles of service, I have never encountered a species quite like humanity. I'll take that as a compliment. It is. Yeah, an observation. Zixtil hesitated, then added, but one that I believe my superiors will find highly interesting. Your approach to technology, to problem-solving, to survival itself. It's unlike anything in our records. Different isn't bad, Reed pointed out. No, the commander agreed slowly. Different is simply different. And sometimes different is exactly what is needed. The formal exchange of diplomatic credentials took place the following day. The ceremony, held in the Varaxi flagship's Grand Assembly Hall, was a stark contrast of styles. The Varaxi delegation in their perfectly aligned formation, resplendent in ceremonial armor that gleamed under the crystalline lights, and the human contingent trying their best to look uniform despite their tendency to fidget, shift position, and occasionally whisper jokes to each other. Captain Reed had managed to find her dress uniform, which had been carefully stored in a container under her bunk. It was still wrinkled in places, but it was the cleanest the Varaxi had seen her since their meeting. Commander Zixtil presented the formal recognition document, a beautiful crystalline tablet inscribed with both Varaxi script and a surprisingly accurate rendition of human English. On behalf of the Varaxi Eternal Fleet and the convergence of allied species, the commander intoned, I recognize the United Earth Coalition as a sovereign interstellar power and extend an invitation for further diplomatic relations. Reed accepted the tablet with appropriate solemnity. On behalf of humanity and the United Earth Coalition, I accept this recognition and the appendage of friendship it represents. There was a smattering of applause from the human delegation, which quickly died down when they realized the Varaxi didn't share the custom. Reed then presented her counterpart with humanity's diplomatic package, a data crystal containing cultural, scientific, and historical information, along with a small wooden box. The data crystal contains the formal diplomatic stuff, Reed explained. The box is a personal gift from me to you, Commander. Zix-Till, clearly not expecting this deviation from protocol, carefully opened the wooden container. Inside was a roll of silver duct tape and a small metal canister labeled WD-40. The human delegation tried unsuccessfully to suppress their laughter. The universal repair kit, Reed explained with a grin. If it moves and it shouldn't, use the tape. If it doesn't move and it should, use the spray. These two items have saved human butts more times than I can count. For a moment, Commander Zix-Till seemed at a loss for words. Then, to everyone's surprise, she produced a sound that the humans' translators identified as laughter. A rare display of emotion from the normally composed Varaxi. I shall treasure these artifacts, the commander said, carefully placing them back in the box, and perhaps study them to unlock the mysterious power they seem to hold over your species. Good luck with that, Reed replied. We've been using them for centuries, and we still don't fully understand their power. As the Bangalore prepared to depart, Lieutenant Kozlov found himself back at the observation port, watching the human vessel disconnect from the docking collar. It still looks like it could fall apart at any moment, he observed to Commander Zix-Till, who had joined him. And yet it won't, she replied. That is the paradox of humanity, I believe. They appear chaotic, disorganized, even primitive in some ways. But there is a method to their madness that produces remarkable results. Their engineers reconfigured our environmental systems in ways that our designers never considered, Kozlov admitted. Initial simulations suggest the modifications will improve efficiency by 12%. Indeed, and their approach to redundancy and emergency protocols, our tacticians are already implementing some of their suggestions. The human ship fired its maneuvering thrusters, an uneven pulsing pattern that made Kozlov wince but somehow resulted in a perfectly executed departure vector. Will they become allies, do you think? He asked. Commander Zix-Till's antennae swayed thoughtfully. I believe they already are, Lieutenant. The question is what kind of allies they will be. Unpredictable ones, certainly. Yes, but perhaps that is exactly the kind the Convergence needs right now. The commander turned away from the viewport. After all, the Hive consciousness has defeated every conventional strategy we've deployed against them. Perhaps what we need is something unconventional. You're not suggesting we rely on humans to help us against the Hive? Kozlov couldn't keep the shock from his voice. I'm suggesting that any species that can turn a food synthesizer into a 3D printer and an atmospheric scrubber might have some interesting perspectives on warfare. The commander's mandibles clicked in what Kozlov now recognized as amusement. Besides, I'm curious to see what they would make of Hive technology if they got their hands on it. That's a terrifying thought. Is it? I found myself rather comforted by Captain Reed's approach to problem solving. When conventional methods fail, try something no one would expect, including reactor overloads and homemade explosive chemicals. As the Bangalore engaged its main engines, all three mismatched propulsion systems firing in what should have been an unstable configuration but somehow wasn't. Lieutenant Kozlov had to admit there was something impressive about human engineering. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't perfect, but it was resilient in ways Varaxi technology wasn't. I've updated our official report to the Convergence Council, Commander Zix-Till said as they watched the human vessel accelerate away. I've classified humanity as a Class 3 emerging power. Class 3? Kozlov was surprised. That's higher than preliminary intelligence suggested. Yes, but preliminary intelligence didn't account for their creativity. The commander's compound eyes reflected the fading image of the Bangalore. They may look primitive, Lieutenant, but make no mistake. Any species that can make a weapon out of a food processor and survive encounters with energy-eating anomalies is not to be underestimated. So we should fear them? No. Commander Zix-Till's voice held a note of finality. We should learn from them, before the Hive does. As the human ship finally vanished into the darkness of space, Lieutenant Kozlov couldn't help but wonder what Captain Reed would make of the Hive consciousness. Somehow he suspected she would just stare at it, scratch her stubble and say, "Nothing a little duct tape can't fix." And the most terrifying part? She might actually be right. Back aboard the Bangalore, Captain Reed settled into her command chair with a satisfied sigh. Well, that went better than expected, she announced to the bridge crew. No major diplomatic incidents. We fixed their ship after breaking it, and we didn't start an interstellar war. I'm calling it a win. Banks nodded in agreement. The Varaxi seemed impressed by our engineering solutions. Impressed? Horrified. It's a fine line. Reed grinned. Set course for Earth, Martinez. I think headquarters is going to want a full report on this one. Already plotted, Captain. ETA 47 days, assuming the port thruster doesn't give out again. And if it does? Martinez shrugged. Then Chief Wallace will hit it with a wrench until it works, and we'll be home in 48 days. Reed laughed. That's the spirit. Humanity. Finding solutions one wrench hit at a time. As the Bangalore accelerated toward home, its mismatched hull plating gleaming dully in the light of a distant star, Reed couldn't help but feel a surge of pride in her ramshackle ship and its resourceful crew. They might not have the most beautiful vessel in space, but beauty wasn't what had kept them alive through anomalies, pirate attacks, and now first contact with an advanced alien civilization. No, what kept humanity thriving in the vastness of space was the same thing that had carried their species through millennia of challenges on Earth. The stubborn refusal to accept that something couldn't be fixed, improved, or repurposed. That and a liberal application of duct tape. You know, Reed mused to no one in particular. I think we've made some friends out there today. Banks raised an eyebrow. Friends who think we're crazy. The best kind of friends, Reed confirmed with a nod. Because when things get really bad, crazy is exactly what you need. Little did she know just how right she was. Or how soon the Varaxi would be calling on humanity's unique brand of problem-solving. But that, as they say, is a story for another day. For now, the Bangalore sailed onward, leaving behind a very confused but oddly hopeful Varaxi fleet, and carrying with it the peculiar pride of a species that had looked at the perfect, gleaming expanse of space and decided that what it really needed was a little more duct tape. Humanity, fuck yeah.